Hello and welcome back to the Agile Fundamentals program from Digital Agility Institute. We are still in part 3 and we are learning about Scrum Foundations. So in the last video, we talked about various Scrum events, right? So, and in this particular video, we would be looking at what are the various Scrum artifacts that are produced by the Scrum team during the course of their sprint execution, right? So the first of the artifacts is the product backlog. I think we have been discussing about product backlog even in our earlier videos as well. So what is product backlog? Product backlog is an evolving, means a continuously evolving and an emergent ordered list. It is a prioritized. When we say ordered list, you understand how much you probably what is the priority of that, what is the impact of that, and what is the urgency of that particular work to be delivered. Each of the features are user stories. The product owner and the team, they understand what is the priority, impact, and urgency of those items. It's a ordered list in the order of priority. And why those are required? It is about accomplishing the product goal that we as a team are looking for, correct? So, and it is the single source of truth. So the product backlog is the single source of truth for the work that the team, the Scrum team it belongs to, is required to accomplish. So that is what is the product backlog. And what all goes into the product backlog? All the list of features and user stories that are required to accomplish the product vision in short, medium term, and long term would be part of the product backlog. And whatever items the Scrum team plans to deliver in the next sprint, they would be pulling from the product backlog for their sprint planning purposes. So they will look at the product backlog and they will see what all user stories or features are ready, correct? And those items that are ready, they will try to come up with what we called as the sprint goal, correct? And to meet that sprint goal and to understand what value we can deliver by accomplishing that sprint goal, they start pulling the work from the product backlog into the sprint backlog. Now, what is the commitment from a product backlog by the Scrum team is the product goal to be accomplished. And what does a product backlog do? It, looking at a product backlog, you can actually tell what is the target state of the product that we are working on, correct? We can always understand what is the goal or what is the final state of that or future state of that product based on the product goal that is defined, right, with for that particular product backlog for a certain period of time, whatever duration the product goal is planned for, correct? And the product goal is part of your product backlog. So that is the first artifact, which is called as the product backlog. Now moving on to the next artifact, that is the sprint backlog, and we talked about that a bit when we talked about the sprint planning. What does sprint backlog contain? Sprint backlog contains the sprint goal. What is that we are looking to accomplish in this sprint, whatever duration that they have planned for, right? It may be 2 weeks, 1 week, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. So whatever the sprint duration is, depending on the sprint duration and the capacity of the team allocated for that sprint, they would look at finalizing a sprint goal, and that would be part of your sprint backlog. And it would also contain the sprint backlog would also contain all the product backlog items which need to be completed or which are committed to be completed by the Scrum team for the current sprint. So that is what will be in the sprint backlog. And what it is actually, it is the set of actions, set of features or set of user stories, a plan that is committed to by the development team or the Scrum team, or the that plans to delivering the value that the customer is looking for by accomplishing that sprint goal. And as we discussed, right, it is a live sprint backlog is not something written in stone, right? It's kind of a live artifact that based on the changes coming through, the sprint backlog is updated throughout the sprint depending on what is the quantum of change that is coming through and what is the level of detail. Sprint backlog should not be kind of a comprehensive document, correct? It is about having just enough detail what is required for the team to accomplish the particular goal. That is the detail we want, so that they understand what is required to be done. They know what is the acceptance criteria that is required to be fulfilled and what is the definition of done. So those, and they can review and inspect around those items so that they are very clear on this is what we need to accomplish as part of this sprint, right? And who does all this sprint backlog? It is planned by the developer for themselves, right? So sprint backlog is owned by the development team or the Scrum team overall. Okay, product backlog is owned by the product owner. That distinction should be very clear. Okay, moving on to the next artifact. Oops, we're continuing with the sprint backlog. Now, the sprint backlog, again, what we are committing within the sprint backlog is the sprint goal. Again, we are trying to cover this a little bit more. What is a sprint goal? Again, it is the single most objective or single most focus for the sprint for the Scrum team. The goal remains fixed. What work happens for accomplishing that goal can change. And you remember the point we discussed earlier. Whatever changes are coming through from the product owner, right, or other stakeholders through the product owner, till the time it does not alter the sprint goal, it is well within the purview of Scrum to accept that change. If it is altering the product goal itself, then the product goal becomes obsolete. That means we have to cancel the sprint and renegotiate. But till the time the sprint goal is not compromised by bringing in some changes, the sprint backlog is very flexible. Okay, then creates coherence and focus, encouraging the team to work together. So because it is very clear on what the team is looking to accomplish, it creates that focus, commitment, and we talked about these as Scrum values, right? So it gives the team to collaborate on that particular sprint goal. And when it is created, it is a sprint goal is created obviously during the sprint planning exercise, which we discussed as part of the events, Scrum events video that was just prior to this one. If you have any questions, go back and refer to that again, right? So that is about the overall sprint backlog. Now moving to the next artifact, that is the product increment. Now, what is a product increment? Product increment is the outcome that you are accomplishing, right? That you are accomplishing from the sprint. right? That is again, every product increment is kind of contributing to us as a team accomplishing the product goal. So every product increment when we are trying to, or every sprint goal when we are trying to finalize, we as a team need to be very clear to understand, okay, how this increment or how this additional feature or enhancement that we are adding to the product is helping us accomplish the product goal. Correct? That is something, and that is part of our empirical delivery or iterative delivery that we are always focused on, and it should be an add-on to the earlier increments that we have delivered. Correct? And then must be usable, fit for use, fit for purpose. Every increment that you provide should be fit for use by the customer, and it should fit their purpose as well. Now, there can be multiple increments that can be created because it depends on the capacity of the team and the size and complexity of the increment. But these are delivered or presented for the customers to review as part of the sprint review event. Okay, and product increment may be delivered even before the end of the sprint. If it is already a ready feature available, you have a 4-week sprint, you don't need to wait for 4 weeks to deliver that to the customers, right? If you have completed certain product increment in 2 weeks, well ahead, go ahead and deliver that to the customers and start getting value from that, right? The customers also will start getting value from that. Remember, the focus is on delivering value faster. So that is a bit about product increment. And what is the commitment that we are making for the product increment is the fulfillment of definition of done. Right? What is definition of done? It is the formal description of what defines the completion of the increment. What are the quality measures? What are the performance measures that are supposed to be met? That is our definition of done. Of course, we will talk more about definition of ready and definition of done. Definition of done also creates the required transparency on the shared understanding of what actually is delivered by the team, right? Are you expecting exactly what you committed for, and is your definition of a feature being completed the same as what customer wants or customer understands? Correct? And if this definition of done is not met, that means a backlog is, that particular product increment is not complete if the definition of done is not met. So if the quality parameters are not met, if the performance parameters are not met, if the actual acceptance criteria is not met, then no way that particular backlog item is complete. So ultimately now the backlog item will have to go back to the product backlog, and again it is reordered if in case it is not done. There is no way that because in this sprint this backlog item is not met, so it will automatically carry over to the next one. That is not the ideal way of doing it. So ideally, if a backlog item is not completed, it goes back to the product backlog and it gets reprioritized for the next sprint. And then based on that, you again define the sprint goal. If it falls within that priority, it may come back into the sprint backlog and is delivered. Okay, so that is about overall Scrum artifacts. So Scrum artifacts are 3. One is the product backlog, second is the sprint backlog, and the third one is the product increment. These are essentially the 3 artifacts that are produced during the sprints. That brings us to the next activity, the activity number 5. And what is that we want you to do in this? With all that we discussed about these artifacts, can you reflect and can you really put your thinking hat on again to say what could be the impact if these artifacts are not produced? If these artifacts, what is the value you are getting from these artifacts, right? Why these artifacts are significant? And that is something we would like you to reflect on, right? And in the next segment, when we come back, we will start our discussion on the second framework that is mostly used, which is called as Kanban. So with this particular activity and this video, we come to the end of discussion on Scrum. Hope you got a good understanding of Scrum. And if you really want to explore this further, there are multiple certifications that dig deeper into Scrum. So you have PSM 1, Principal Scrum Master 1, Principal Scrum Master 2, and Principal Scrum Master 3. And you also have Safe Scrum Master certification and Safe Advanced Scrum Master certification. You also have Certified Scrum Master, that is an alternate certification as well. And if you really want something hands-on on Scrum for you to really become a great Scrum Master, you can look at our program, which is called as Expert Scrum Master Program, which is a completely hands-on program, and we run it for free. We finished our first batch and lots of accolades for that. Watch out that and the feedback on the program on our website www.digitalagilityinstitute.com, and you can look up for that in our experiential learning programs. On YouTube also we have lots of videos that have been published. Look for Establishing Scrum Master under our channel youtube.com/Nivarthi Jairam. Hope you have enjoyed this session and also the earlier sessions on Scrum, and we look forward to you to joining us in the future sessions which will be about Kanban. See you soon. Happy learning.